the only thing left open to us, and that was to have a public demonstration in Parliament Square in defence of Julian Assange, and we're very pleased to have the Anything to Say statue here as our platform today. So this is a very, very urgent moment. This is really the 11th hour for Julian Assange in the British court system. So you will hear this many times this afternoon. Please, whatever you have done so far to help this campaign to defend the free press, please do more now. Now is exactly the right moment to pull out every single stop to stop Julian Assange being extradited to the United States and put on trial for crimes which he did not commit and for being a journalist. That cannot stand. Please redouble your campaigning efforts. Now, the first person that I've got here to speak to you today is an MP who stood by Julian Assange from the beginning. He's the only MP to have got in to Belmarsh to see Julian Assange. Please welcome Labour MP John McDonnell.
First of all, can I just say, can we thank the artist who's with us who created this formation? Thank you very much for this piece of work. It says more eloquently in statue form what most of us can say. As I said, I'm John MacDonald, I'm a Labour MP, but I'm the secretary of the National Union of Journalists Parliamentary Group. So our job is to speak up for journalists in Parliament. And we speak up for journalists who've been abused, imprisoned, and sometimes who've lost their lives performing their role in democratic and undemocratic societies, which is to expose the truth and to hold politicians to account for their decisions. Julian Assange is a journalist. He undertook, yes, a perilous mission, but it was a mission that had to happen, which was to expose the truth about the war crimes that were taking place, often in our name, in Iraq and elsewhere. And for standing up for the truth, for exposing the truth, as any true journalist would. He's been imprisoned year after year. Only a couple of miles away from us in Belmarsh now, he's the longest serving political prisoner that there is in this country. We now know more about the role of the state in this country too, thanks to the work of another journalist called Stefania Massimi. She has been absolutely dogged over the last 8 years in pursuing the truth about how Julian was treated in this country, and in particular the role of the Crown Prosecution Service. We now know more as a result of those Freedom of Information requests about how much collusion there was between the Crown Prosecution Service here and the Swedish authorities to secure Julian's extradition to America. And we know the risk to his life if he's extradited. We'll continue to expose that, but I believe it brings shame upon this country for the role it has played in the persecution of a journalist who simply wanted to do what journalists should do, is report the truth. Yes. That's why in this coming period now, exactly as John Rees has said, this is absolutely critical now. We do all that we can to prevent the extradition. But I think more importantly, we demand the freedom of Julian Assange. He should be home with his family. Julian Assange's imprisonment and persecution brings eternal shame on this country. And we need to continue to expose it and stand in solidarity. So I think all of us here today, let's recommit ourselves to this campaign. Freedom for Julian Assange, protection of journalists, and yes, all those who speak the truth. Solidarity.
Thanks so much, John. We're very grateful for your support. And now I'd like to welcome the person who sculpted these magnificent statues, the Italian sculptor Davide Dormino. Please give him a huge welcome for all the work that he's done and for this piece of work.
When men are silent for too long, sometimes it's the statue that speak.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect place. Mandela is here. Gandhi is here. And Millicent Garrett Fawcett is here. Art cannot change the world, but it has the capacity to give us a different vision, to show us the contradiction of our time and see the world with new eyes. This sculpture is intended to be a weapon of critical mass construction. There is a moment when dissent becomes a duty.
Yes.
And this is the proof. Free Assange!
Thank you very much, Davide. Thank you for the work and for the effort of bringing it here. The next speaker that I want to introduce you to is a fantastic MP. She's had a hard time staying an MP. We're all incredibly glad that she is, and she's been a supporter of Julian Assange since the very beginning. Please welcome to the stage the MP for the Labour Party, Assange Begum.
Julian's. As John said, I'm Assange Begum and I'm the Labour MP for the constituency of Poplar and Limehouse, a proud East London constituency that stood in its hundreds and thousands opposing the Iraq war. We all have a duty to defend our freedom of speech, and we all have the right to know. Edward, Chelsea and Julian did that for us. They made their move in spite of becoming visible, in spite of becoming threatened, judged and jailed. They chose courage. There will be those that call them traitors, but for me, I know they will go down in history as being among the greatest of truth tellers in modern history.
Yes.
Most statues in public places commemorate warriors and those that took us and led us to war. And I'm glad that this instalment is here today outside and in Parliament Square and outside Parliament. Because in Parliament, inside and outside Parliament as well, as you can see here, there are many statues and there are many portraits just commemorating all of that. And the late Tony Benn, when he reflected on the statues and memorials that exist inside Parliament, said when he and Jeremy Corbyn went and put the plaque up for Emily Wilding Davison, he reflected and he said that this place doesn't actually commemorate and mark those who fought for truth and those who fought for democracy. If one walks around this place, one sees statues of people, not one of whom who believed in democracy, votes for women or anything else. We have to be sure that we are a workshop, not a museum. So as we stand here, let's pay homage to these three whistleblowers who said no to war, who said no to the lies that took us and led us to war, and who said no to the intrusion into private life that helps perpetuate war as well. Manning, Assange and Snowden accepted their loss of freedom. They've paid such a huge price so that we could have the truth. And I think we're not really free until they are all free. Yes. We are not free until Julian Assange is free. So let's pledge at this critical moment to do everything that we can to raise his plight, to raise the plight and awareness of the campaign. Julian once said, one of the best ways to achieve justice is to expose injustice.
Yeah.
May we be among the truth tellers and may we be among those in history who expose injustice. Thank you in solidarity.
Assange Begum, thank you very much. Now, before I introduce the next speaker, I just want to make this announcement, and I want you to carry this away to whichever organisations you're in touch with, or your friends, or your family, because there will soon be a date given by the court to bring Julian Assange's final appeal before them. We may not have much time when that happens, but when it happens, it's extraordinarily important that there is the most massive demonstration so far in support of Julian Assange outside the court on that day. So please do link up with the DEA website and with our Twitter feed and Facebook, and look out for that announcement. And when it comes, please be able to respond and to mobilise on an unprecedented scale. Now, my next speaker is Stella Assange. She needs no introduction to you, but she has fought relentlessly and with such courage that I ask you please to give her an enormous welcome here.
Thanks everyone. It's wonderful to be here on this beautiful day and see such a wonderful turnout. I'm getting asked, where are we at? Well, we're really at the end game now. The fight is on. This is my message. Yes, the legal avenues have narrowed dramatically, but we were ready for this, right? We know what kind of battle we're fighting. A political battle, a fight against injustice, where people speaking out, witnessing this injustice, and giving it a name is what will stop it. This statue here today has this message, anything to say. These three men are everyman.
Yes.
They witnessed injustice and they spoke up. And we need to speak up just like they did.
Definitely.
Because that's what makes us human.
Yes. Yes.
By gagging them, by imprisoning them, by punishing them, they're punishing all of us.
Yes!
Because they told us what we needed to know about injustice being carried out in our name against us. Julian depends on each and every one of you and every person you can speak to inform them, to move them into understanding what's at stake. And what's at stake is democracy itself.
Yes.
The case against Julian goes to the heart, the fundamentals of what it means to live in an open, democratic society where we can challenge authority, where we can speak up, whether we're right or wrong. We have to be able to speak, to refine our ideas, to be able to be challenged. And just because there are people in position of authority, they're abusing their authority, they're abusing the legislation, they're abusing the surveillance tools that have been developed over the last decade or so, and they're abusing the coercive powers of the state, physical and digital, to prevent you from speaking out. We are losing our rights. Julian's case is caught up in a trajectory in which we are all losing our rights. And the right to freedom of speech is at the center of all our democratic rights. It underpins everything. We will lose all our rights if we lose the freedom of speech. And Julian's case is the most righteous case of freedom of speech today, in our generation, in this century. We have to free him. His life depends on it, but all our lives and our liberties also depend on it. Thank you. Free Julian Assange.
Okay. So the reason we're all here is because we understand We never need the microphone actually being charged here, it's just kind of superfluous. But I just want to say a word or two about journalism. Because there are really only two types of journalism. There's the type that prints the corporate handouts and the government press releases, and there's the type of journalism that prints what they don't want you to know. Now, Julian Assange is in trouble because he's the kind of journalist that prints what you need to know, but they don't want you to know. And it's a special pleasure now to introduce a journalist who does exactly the same thing. Please welcome to the platform, Matt Taibbi.
Stand on the chair. Yep. Stand on the chair.
Just on next to you.
Wow, thank you. So I have a confession to make. Like a lot of journalists, when Julian first arrived on the scene, I didn't like him. Among other things, he had cool hair, he was skinny, he even did Fashion Week here in London, I think, at one point. And among other things, he was breaking all these huge stories. And really, just to get down to it, I was jealous. I'm going to admit it. We're in London, so I might as well quote Shakespeare, beware the green-eyed monster who doth mock the meat it feeds on, and all that. We journalists were jealous of Julian Assange. And I didn't have a good reason for being jealous of him, so I invented one. And the reason I invented was, I didn't like the idea of radical transparency. I thought, this is irresponsible. How can you just dump all these secrets on people? They have to be filtered out by responsible people. And I thought of myself as a free thinker at the time. And I was so brainwashed that I forgot, as a lot of people forget, that secrets do not belong to governments. Secrets don't belong to governments. Information, all information, belongs to us. Okay? Governments govern at the consent of the governed. If they want to keep secrets, they have to do it with our permission.
Yes.
They must serve us.
Now, I'm an American. There's a lot of, I know there's some Americans here. There are obviously a lot of people from the UK here. We have a lot of secrets right now.
Yes.
Why is that? We're building skyscrapers and huge underground complexes because we don't have a place to keep all of it. Why is that? Julian answered that question. I want to quote from an essay he wrote. He wrote, authoritarian regimes give rise to forces which oppose them by pushing against the individual and collective will to freedom, truth, and self-realization. Plans which assist authoritarian rule, once discovered, induce resistance. Hence, these plans are concealed by successful authoritarian powers. Now, to translate that in a brief way, the worse the government is, the more secrets there are. And we have a lot of secrets now. Now, Julian Assange, there's a brutal irony about this. He became famous at a time when, particularly America, but a lot of the Western governments were building a vast secret state to deal with what they called the threat of foreign terrorism. They built a complex of secret prisons, programs of extraordinary rendition, all the terrible things that we learned about, in large part because of WikiLeaks. Today, the awful thing about what's happening with Julian Assange is that governments are openly being repressive. They openly want to put this man in jail for 175 years. Now, why are they doing that? Most of the charges have to do with the Espionage Act. What is the Espionage Act? Well, it contains offenses like conspiracy to obtain national defense information. What is national defense information? Well, as it happens, when I asked about this, it's basically anything they say it is. So what is conspiracy to obtain national defense information? There's another word for that too, it's journalism. They want to put him in jail for 175 years for practicing journalism. If this were Andrei Sakharov or Nelson Mandela, every human rights organization in the world would be appalled at this. They would call this the worst human rights offense of our generation. But because the West is doing this, we get silence from our media. That is inexcusable.
Speak up now!
And the last thing I'll say is, if you're okay with this happening to Julian Assange, you better be okay with it happening to a whole lot of other people, because that's going to be the reality in about 10 minutes. If they get away with doing this, that's why it's so important to rally now to prevent this from happening. Whether preventing his extradition, preventing his imprisonment in the United States, once they get away with this, the floodgates will be open, and this will become a common occurrence. There will be no more speeches in parks. It'll just be something that happens every day, and people won't even notice anymore. If we want to prevent that from happening, we have to act now.
Yes! Now!
So, do not let this happen. Free Julian Assange. Thank you very much.
From the very beginning, there's been the closest possible association between the material that Julian Assange released and the anti-war movement. When I went down to report at the Frontline Club on the initial revelations of the Afghan war logs, it was because I was one of the founder members of the Stop the War coalition in this country. It's for that reason that one of the most commonly seen interviews with Julian Assange is the one where he's just stepped off the platform at a Stop the War coalition demonstration in Trafalgar Square. And from that day to this, the anti-war movement in this country has stood solidly with Julian Assange, and for that reason, it's my pleasure to welcome a speaker from the Stop the War coalition, Shabir Akka.
Thank you, and thank you all for being out here today. The imprisonment and the torture of Julian Assange is an absolute crime. His treatment shows us with absolute clarity that we do not live in a democratic society. We do not have a free press. The message from this state is that if you dare expose their crimes, if you dare to oppose their narrative, they will bring down their full weight against you. And how much clearer can it be when the man who exposed this government's butchering of the people of Afghanistan and Iraq is languishing in prison, facing extradition and 175 years in an American cell, while the man who is responsible for the butchering of those people, the mass murderer, war criminal Tony Blair, he not only walks free, but he was rewarded with a knighthood. He continues to expand his empire by advising dictators and murderers on how to carry out their crimes. At the moment, it is no surprise that this government is pushing so hard to extradite Julian Assange, while they are also simultaneously passing laws to restrict our ability to protest, to restrict our ability to strike, to give the police and the state even more powers against us. And at the same time, they are pushing for mass escalation of a war that threatens to expand and that threatens the lives of millions and millions of more people. So we have an absolute duty when they try to stop us to protest even more. When they beat the drums of war, to make sure that we mobilize and stop their warmongering. And we know that even in the case of Julian Assange, it is not something that will be decided in a vacuum in the courts. The court of public opinion matters. The pressure that we build on the streets matters. And that's why we need to keep turning out in bigger numbers for Julian Assange. We need to turn out in bigger numbers to oppose the war in Ukraine. And we need to turn out in bigger numbers to stop this authoritarian government from removing our hard-won democratic rights and civil liberties. So I just want to make one plug, which is that on the 8th of July, the Stop the War Coalition has a national day of action against the war in Ukraine, calling for peace. Please, if you're not already a member of Stop the War, join it. Come out on the streets and let's make the case against war. Let's defend Julian Assange. Let's build on his legacy. See you all in the streets. Solidarity.
Thanks very much. And now I want to ask Kristen Hawkinson, the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, to come to the platform to explain to us exactly where we are now in this struggle and what we need to do next. Kristen.
Hi everybody, thanks for being here today. I want to talk a little bit about words and lawyers.
Yes, please.
English is not my first language, so I'm fascinated about the use of language and words and how it is abused and used in the battle against justice. 13 years ago, when I started working with Julian, preparing the release of the Collateral murder video, I'm sure that all of you have seen, it struck me that they used the word engagement in a certain context. No, for me, engagement was something that had a pleasant connotation. This was the word that used when people got together and decided to tie the knot, as I think you call it, until death do them apart. But in the vocabulary of the American military, engagement, yes, it does have to do with death, but it means fatal killing. That is the engagement that the lawyers in Pentagon came up with when they drew up the rules of engagement. And those were the rules the lawyers drew up and the helicopter pilots were thinking about when they asked for permission to engage, to open fire, to assassinate Matasha Tomau, an innocent civilian who came upon the scene to save the life of an injured man, Said Sma, who worked for Reuters. Permission to engage, they asked. Give us permission to engage. Before they opened fire and sprayed 30mm hollow bullets upon the vehicle, where inside were the two children, Said and Sma, who were only saved because their father threw his body over them and shielded them in front of the car. Think about these lawyers who are sitting, drawing up these documents, finding new meanings to these words. Engagement. It's killing. And think about the fact that Julian is being indicted for publishing these rules of engagement. You are not even allowed or supposed to see the rules they play by in their assassination games in wars. They do not charge him for publishing the Collateral murder video for one purpose only, because they do not dare to have that shown in a courtroom at any point, and you know why. This is how they use language. We all know how the lawyers in Pentagon and the Department of Justice drew up manuals on how the military could torture prisoners. But of course they didn't call it torture. What shall we call it so it sounds better? Enhanced interrogation techniques. That's waterboarding 80 times, 90 times. Electrocution, hanging up on the hand until you are disjointed on the arms. Torture, pure. No enhanced interrogation techniques.
Bravo! Thank
Now,
you.
I want to draw up a little scene that we came to learn about in January this year. when Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, later Secretary of State, do I have a boo? Mike Pompeo was director of CIA in 2017, and he was very hopeful that he could become the Republican nominee for election next year. So of course he published a book, his memoir, his fond memoir, From the Halls of Power, when he was director of CIA and later Secretary of State. And think about this. He tells a story that just before Christmas 2017, he sat in a cozy atmosphere with his family. Think about this atmosphere. The wife is preparing the dinner, I guess. There are decorations, the Christmas tree is up, the gifts on the floor. And he tells that he was sitting, browsing through and reading the manual on extrajudicial killings.
Shame!
That's the Christmas that Pompeo wanted and liked the most. And why is this relevant? Yes, because we now know that in the same period, because of brave journalists who did deep investigation, there were plans being drawn up to assassinate Julian Assange, to kidnap him or assassinate him in the Ecuadorian embassy. A real plan that was introduced in the White House. And we furthermore know this because two brave witnesses who are protected have issued statements that they knew about this plan and poisoning was being discussed. That was what Pompeo was concocting just before Christmas 2017 while head of the CIA.
Criminal! Pompeo! Criminal! Pompeo!
Now, we are possibly not going to hear about all this in the court of law in the extradition hearing and the High Court. Why? Because on 6th of January, Justice Swift, as his name is Justice Swift, decided after almost 9 months of deliberation to spit out 3.5 pages of his ruling that he saw no reason for Julian Assange to have an appeal in High Court. No ruling at all. He complained about the mass of paperwork and documents that he was pestered to go through. 200 pages, too long. It's about a man's life. That's a defense document. It should have been less. I see nothing there. The story about the plan to kidnap and kill Julian Assange? No, it's just a journalistic story. It's based on 30 named and unnamed sources, published in Yahoo News, written by 3 prominent investigative journalists. No, it's just some speculation by a journalist. The protected witnesses who knew that there was a plan to poison Julian Assange, now not worthy of being heard in the High Court in London, said Justice Swift. And on he went, in the 3.5 pages. He didn't go through any detail. He didn't bother. That document, you should read it. It clarifies for us that the entire judicial process in this country is a facade. Yes. It's a total facade. Yes. It is injustice, persecution, cloaked in to make it look like it's justice, but it's not. And the more steps we take in the courts here in London, the more obvious it becomes. And Justice Swift, he doesn't even spend much effort in trying to cloak the real fact of the matter that he had already decided to take a politicized opinion before he even got the 200 documents. And I doubt that he read through the entire thing. He was probably reading the memoirs by the great Mike Pompeo at the time.
Shame on Jonathan Swift!
My good friend Craig Murray wrote an excellent piece the other day. Please read him and support him. He is very good. And he reminded people how fascism and Nazism crept into the German psyche in the 30s. And there was no shortages of lawyers, scholars, legal scholars to write up the justification for the wrongdoing. And at the Nuremberg trial, there was no shortage of documents, probably more than 200, as a defense document. Well, listen, it's all in the laws. It has been passed as laws, and these legal scholars, they said I was in the right. And we got orders to do it. It's called the Nuremberg defense. It was dismissed at the Nuremberg trial. When it comes to these heinous acts, you have to be accountable. No matter what the lawyers have drawn up, no matter what the facade is. And that is what we are going to be having in mind. We are going to hold these people account. Every individual has taken part in this persecution against Julian Assange. Do not forget that. We will get history, if not history, to judge these people, and they will be spat on.
We will win this!
The sons and daughters and granddaughters and grandsons, they will be ashamed of the legacy of those individuals in the court, in the entire bloody corrupt system who took part in this persecution. But we are almost running out of time. We need to save a man's life. We need to save journalism. We need to act now, and we cannot stay silent. We need to scream out from the top of our voice. Stop this! No extradition! Free Julian Assange!
Thanks very much. So I'm sure by now you have the message of this rally. We are at 5 minutes to midnight in this case. There is a crucial and possibly final court case on the horizon. When the announcement comes of the date of that case, please be ready. Please be ready to mobilise. And that means don't just watch out for the announcement and start to argue with your friends and your family, your fellow campaigners, third trade unionists. When you hear that announcement, start arguing now that you must be there, that you must make that the most effective demonstration that we've had in this case so far, because we're at the most decisive point of this case so far. So that's the message from us to you today. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to ask now Dave Rovics, who has sung for Assange for many, many occasions, but has made an special effort. He was performing at Glastonbury. He's rushed up here to be with us today, so I hope that you'll give him a warm welcome. When Dave finishes, please do feel free to come and take the empty chair, take a selfie, publicise it, say a few words, and get the voice out, not just of us, but of all of you who are here today. But when you get on the chair, please just remember this. One of the most famous, and in my view, one of the best ever political speeches was made by Abraham Lincoln, and it's called the Gettysburg Address. It is 272 words long, and it took him 2 minutes to deliver. There is really no need for you to try and exceed Abraham Lincoln when you get up on the chair. Thank you very much.
Now! Jail the war criminals! Jail the war criminals! No extradition! No extradition!
Ready?
Please, I'm listening to the music. Yeah, you're right between the camera and why don't you move your camera? Why don't you move?
Hey. Okay, yeah. Behind these prison walls, there's a man who's won awards for the work that he has done and all that it affords, such as the knowledge of the horrors committed in our name. They can't stop the message, so the messenger gets blamed. Behind these prison walls, in solitary confinement, in a land of rolling hills and royalty and other such refinement, is someone who is a hero. The whistleblowers everywhere who helped them tell the world of the crimes of Tony Blair. Behind these prison walls, you will find a mortal man. The reason why we know what happened in Afghanistan, when the soldiers of the empire, who sunset long before, were torturing civilians in their terror war. Behind these prison walls is a part of WikiLeaks, an eloquent orator, but you won't hear him speak. Locked away in silence, one who knows too well how those in power act when there's another war to sell. Behind these prison walls is one who stands accused of exactly what offenses the U.S. has refused to say precisely which, or to try to clear the mist, or to explain how he's not the same as other journalists. Behind these prison walls is a person they deprive of most of the things in life that keep us all alive. A person being tortured as we stand here now for revealing the war crimes. What, when, where, how? Behind these prison walls, our very right to be informed of what the hell is going on is the teacup in this storm. With knowledge there is power, so the solution by the crown, a 24-hour-a-day indefinite lockdown. Behind these prison walls, free Julian Assange. Thank you very much.